What's going on, family? This is Drew Davis, and we will be talking about books today, kind of like we do all the time. After I finish books, and since I've had a lot of stuff in storage, a lot of my books are in storage. Once I finish the book, I just kind of put it in a box and kind of just start taping the box up or just having it ready to be put into storage since that's where a lot of my books are going right now. But as I went about it, I thought about it a little bit. I said, you know what? I think an interesting thing would be to just take some time, open a box, and go through a couple of the reads I have and talk about them a little bit. And maybe one of these books are a book that you've read, or just maybe a book stands out as far as one that you will read or purchase in the future. So without further ado, let's get started. And the first book we have here is Perfect Eloquence, and it is a book about Vin Scully. It is kind of has a foreword by Ron Rappaport and is edited by Tom Horfarth. 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 Hopefully that's right. This book, I actually picked it up. I saw it at Barnes and Noble. Was really, really interested in reading about Vin Scully. Heard some great things about him when I was really thinking about getting into broadcasting and just kind of getting my feet wet a little bit. And reading this book, there's just so much good stuff in here. It talks about the history of the Dodgers, moving from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, and also just Vin Scully's whole time as a broadcaster or working with the Los Angeles Dodgers up until his retirement. But it has a lot of people. It has a lot of essays of people writing in, people he worked with, players, people that were around him at the time, people that look up to him, other announcers and broadcasters, where they say Vin Scully is the creme de la creme of broadcasting and what you should be and what you should aim to be as a broadcaster. And honestly, the whole time I read this, I wanted to say that it's the kind of book that if I passed away or when I pass away or when it's time for me to go, that people have enough nice things like this to say about me. Whether if it was for my career, whether if it was me as a man, a husband, a father, whatever it might be. This book, it rounds just like that. Because Vince Scully is not the type to talk about himself. He's probably not the type to write a book about himself either. So it's good that somebody thought of the idea to get other people to write about Vince Scully and to talk about him in ways that he would probably disregard or downplay because that's how Vince Scully was. So gave this book 5 stars. It is a really, 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 really good book. Baseball fans, sports fans, I think anybody that likes a good story would appreciate this one. All right, and next we have one of my favorite books that I read last year, Why We Love Football, A History in 100 Moments by Joe Posnanski. And I've been playing football since I was 8 years old. Stopped playing professionally at about 26. Been around college football, been around NFL football, watched football every weekend. And there's some stuff that I learned in this book that I don't think I would have been able to learn or taken the time to learn otherwise. He talks about 100 moments in sports. I think with that, he talks about players as well, which although we think we might know all the players that played in the NFL or people that had a very prominent impact on the game, you have no idea and no clue unless you've been built into the foundation of football. And they talk about guys' names I've never heard before, and that doesn't say anything less about me as a football fanatic, but it lets me know how far the history of football stretches. It talks about the rules and how they were developed. They talk about players that might have not made it, past a couple of years because they passed away or were injured. They talk about teams moving from this place to another. They talk about ownership of teams. Talk about a whole bunch of stuff in this book. And honestly, it's great. I will say one of the secret gems in this book is Joe puts his favorite players of all times at, his top 10, I guess you could say, at, one is at 100, the other's at 90, the other is 80. So it's pretty good. I'm not going to say the names. I'm not going to let you know who those people are. But I thought that that was just a pretty good gem to put in here for him to get 100 moments in football and then him also to slide who his favorite players are in there as well. Just a phenomenal book. I blew through this. It was right. before the football season kicked off. I just wanted to read something that was a little bit more football heavy or just got me ready for football season. And honestly, I'm a real fan of Joe Posnanski. Does a lot of stuff around sports. Has another book, Why We Love Baseball. Talks about 100 moments in baseball. I'm going to take time to read that too, probably before the baseball season kicks off. So once again, if you love football, if you love the history of it, if you love learning more, this is a book that you need to get as well. Then we got James by Percival Everett. Now, I'm a reader, and so I'm reading all the time, but there was a point in time where I'm sitting here and I'm seeing this book pop up left and right all across book clubs and, getting awards and people saying you need to read this and everybody popping up and reading it at one point in time or another. And I'm always afraid when that happens because you see it has all these accolades, it's in all these places, and you wonder like, man, if I pick this book up and I read it and I don't like it, am I gonna think that something is wrong with me, or am I gonna think that something's off with me if I don't like it or if it doesn't live up to the hype? Or am I gonna have to fake and tell everybody I thought it was good when it really wasn't, but just because everybody else said it was? This book is not like that. Percival Everett is a great writer, does really well with the words he does and puts on paper, causing the reader to think, causing you to fall in love with the characters, their situation, to hang on every string that they're hanging on, to feel like you have skin in the game as well for how everything is going to turn out. Um, and I didn't give the other book a rating, but I'll do that at the end of this. Um, James is a 5-star read. It's a 5-star read. It is a not the same person wrote this, so I got to figure out how to say it the right way, but it is an alternative to Huckleberry Finn, um, written by Mark Twain. Apparently, both authors are different. So this is the story written from the slave's perspective of Jim. And if you're black and you read this book, it'll have a lot of connotation for things that are going on now, for the climate that we are in right now and everything that's going on. But it also gives you that reprieve of being able to escape reading a book of fiction, but also just being able to see black people as people and what we've been for a long time, which is very special and very unique in everything that we do. And so I'm going to leave a lot out, and so I'm not going to go into much about this, but if you've read Huckleberry Finn or you just know of that story, I'd say go back and read that, which I didn't, and then go double back and read this, and I think you'll have a very quality read that you will like. Gave this book 5 stars. Doubling back to the book that I just talked about, Why We Love Football, gave that one 5 stars. So just to give you the idea of what we're going through. Another excellent book. Right here we have, I don't even know what it is. Another excellent book. Right here we have The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And this book, I picked it up. A lot of my friends who are creatives and artists have read this book. I was flying to, not Cancun, because it definitely wasn't Cancun. I think I was flying to somewhere in Jamaica for my sister's wedding, and I sat down to have some breakfast at a bar. And there was this dude reading this book. And the one thing about me is I always have books like in my TBR, or books that are like, all right, this isn't the right time to read this, but I'm gonna double back to this at some point. And he was reading this book, and I asked him how was it, and we started talking, exchange information. He was an artist, and he said the book was really good. And now, one thing I will say, this can be a coffee table book. The book isn't super big. Well, I mean, the book it seems long, but you look at the pages and you look what's on there. Um, a lot of spacing in there. Sorry, I'm trying to get these to you. A lot of spacing in there, quick chapters. And it talks about how to be a great artist, how to be a creative, how to be creative, I guess. Um, I resonate with a lot of this because for me, it deals with being connected to a, not a higher power, but being connected to something outside of the work. So I've done a lot of yoga, done a lot of meditation, and one thing with those areas that it's not really about, hey, let me show up to yoga class and crush this. Let me really be in tune with my body. Let me know how I'm really feeling. Let me know what areas I'm tight. connecting with your mind and saying, okay, how do I want today to be? I don't want to sit here and rush out of yoga and rush to here and rush to there without really experiencing life. And I feel like this book is a lot of that. It talks about ways to create. It talks about, how to create good work. And I just can't say enough good stuff about this. Written by Rick Rubin, who's a legendary producer, worked with guys like, Public Enemy, Run DMC. The list can go on, and I probably couldn't name one fourth of the people that he's worked with. But if you're trying to figure out more ways to work efficiently and to open up your mind in ways of creativity, this is a fantastic book. And I wouldn't even say you have to sit down and read it in a whole or just read it in one sitting. I would tell you, man, just pick up this book once a week and read something, read some of the techniques that he gives or just some of the advice that he gives. Sit with that for a couple days, try to implement it into your life, and you're really going to really feel like, I would hope you feel a difference, but you have to really implement the stuff that he's talking about and try it and experiment with it in order to get the best out of it. And so that's one good thing I would say. This is another 5-star read. The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Ooh, we. Now we have this monstrous book, Saxophone Colossus by Aidan Levy, The Life and Music of Sonny Rollins. Now this book is one of the biggest books I've read in a while, excuse me. It is 700 plus pages, and the writing, it's small and there aren't many pictures in here, and the chapters are long and lengthy. I'm sorry, let me get my life together real quick. Let me drink some water. All right, and we're back. So like I said, Saxophone Colossus, 700 plus page book. It's about one of the greatest saxophone players in the history of jazz, sax, whatever you want to say, Sonny Rollins. If you haven't listened to his music, there are plenty of albums and songs that you can listen to. One thing, if you know about me, I love listening to jazz. I love pulling up at a jazz club or just hearing a live band. It's one of the lost arts of this world. I can't play an instrument, or I haven't really tried, I can honestly say. But I have such a big appreciation for people and musicians that can and that dedicate their whole life to music and learning. One interesting thing about Sonny Rollins is he he's played a couple different types of jazz, and anybody that knows anything about jazz knows how it's changed over time. And I'm not even going to act like I'm a jazz savant and that I know all the different types and whatnot, but from going from bebop to, swing to this to that, I can't tell you what's what or differentiate any of the two. But what I can say is that one thing about Sonny Rollins is that he's always tried to be innovative, and he would spend hours on hours on hours on end practicing in New York underneath the bridge. Um, so he had the right environment to compete with sounds and build up his lungs to be able to put as much strength into everything he was doing into his music. Um, and I kind of want to just leave it at that. As far as just looking at a autobiography, I love biographies not for some strange reason. I love biographies. I like reading about people. I like reading about their life. I like reading about their journey. And if you have the time, this took me a couple months to kind of finish. I was highlighting, I was writing notes, I was kind of listening to albums as he was recording them or they were going through them. I give this autobiography, I give it 5 stars. I give it 5 stars because I stuck with it for 700 plus pages, but also just because to live a full life and traveling the world, experiencing life, experiencing music, being around other musicians. It is a very good read. And like I said, I'm a sucker for a really good autobiography, biography, memoir, whatever it might be. And Aidan Levy did a great job. And the only thing bad, I'll say it, not bad, but you read this book and they get so detailed in everything. He's talking about He's talking about, the club they played at. He's talking about how much the tickets were. He's talking about who was in the band. He's talking about who the owner of the place was at the place that they were doing. Like, they're going to give you A through Z, everything that's happening, so you can't miss out on anything. In the grand scheme of things, when you're reading and you have to read that over and over and over again, it could get a little bit bland, I guess you could say, because you just feel like you're reading. But it's one of the greatest things because you know that he really took his time, making sure he didn't forget about anybody in this book, making sure that he did Sonny Rollins justice, who till this day is still alive, still breathing, doesn't play anymore because he has some mouth problems, which you have with a lot of musicians who have to use their mouth or on an instrument. But for the most part, this is a 5-star read, and I guarantee that if you like jazz or you like music, you like biographies, autobiographies, you will definitely love this one. And now, as we stick with the theme of baseball or just sports in general, which I've already had a couple books that I've talked about, we could talk about this book, Baseball the Movie by Noah Gittell. And there's just sometimes I'm not really in Barnes and Noble like shopping for books that I don't know about. But I might be in Barnes and Noble and run across a cover of a book, read the back of it, look up the artist later on, and maybe put that book on my reading list. And this was one of them. I got this book and I stumbled upon, not got it. I stumbled upon this book, Perfect Eloquence by Vin Scully, Why We Love Football, and maybe one other book around the time. And I saw them and I was like, I think these are going to be my next batches of reads. And at one point in time, there was a sale at Barnes and Noble, double back, a hardcover sale, double back, picked up 2 or 3 of the books, and then slowly started to dig into those as the weeks went on. But baseball was the first sport I played, and you looking at baseball now, it's changed in a way. If you don't have, or if you didn't have a grandpa or a grandfather, which is the same thing, stupid me, a grandfather or a dad or a brother that got you into baseball, you most likely aren't going to be in it or didn't really get in it, or if you didn't play. Baseball is a old timers kind of game. It's America's oldest game or America's greatest game, you can say. And so those that are in and involved around baseball have been around it for quite a while. And so, not saying that there are new people coming to baseball, but if you're a fan of baseball, it's because it's been like coursing through your veins for so long, or you have a special connection to it. Now, this book, Baseball the Movie, I would give this book 4 stars. I liked it. I really liked it. But it talks about the baseball movie and the the inception and the growth of the baseball movie, and what that did from the late 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, and how that grew over time, how that blew up in Hollywood, and then also kind of how it's kind of totally disappeared. If you look now at movies over the last, I would say probably 10 years, 10 to 20 years, you can honestly say that there haven't been many baseball movies made. And those people that know Hollywood know that Hollywood's just trying to strike while the iron's hot. And once something is dull and once something is no longer great or good or profiting, that they'll dump it and they'll move on to the next hottest thing. Now, the funny thing was that baseball was hot at one point in time, and they were able to push their agenda of what was going on in the war and what they expected from families and women and stuff at the time. And they used it as kind of an affront of, heroism. Heroism. Good. You did good, Drew. And then kind of what that entails through the story and what they're trying to give to people. Also, there's a time where, movies are an escape. And there's a certain point in time where you talk about the Great Depression or you just talk about people wanting to escape their lives and hear a great story or hear a good story. Baseball can kind of help you do that with a great ending or just with an overarching happening that they're trying to talk about. And so they talk about all the baseball movies. Noah, Mr. Gittell, talks about the movies he really really likes that were created during a certain period of time, what that looks like over the span of more or less 100 or so years. The good baseball movies, the bad baseball movies, the hard thing about making a baseball movie, the remakes of baseball movies, uh, the stars of, or the faces that come across in baseball movies because there are certain actors. We can also say, and I'm blanking on his name right now, and I don't want to blank on his name, uh, but he's been in a couple. This is gonna bug me a lot. He's been in a couple baseball movies, and I know him as a baseball guy. Dang, he was in not Rookie of the Year, but he was in For the Love of the Game. I want to say he was in Field of Dreams. I want to say that's the same person, but I'm blanking on his name right now. Somebody in the chat will get me. There's people you know that are associated with certain types of genres of movies, and he just happened to be, I think, in two or three baseball movies, very prominent ones. You could talk about Field of Dreams with RIP, deep, very deep voice. I'm not just gonna sit here and blank on all these names while I'm making this video. Um, James Earl Jones. There we go. James Earl Jones, who was in Field of Dreams, who was in Sandlot, who was in this older movie that Bingo and the Traveling Circus, like something like that. Don't want to butcher the name totally. But guys like that who had very prominent acting careers, but who also found a niche or just were drawn to a certain type of movie, sport movie like baseball, like this one is. And so I want to say I gave this book 4 stars. Like I said, it was very good. There's some baseball movies in here they talked about that I didn't even know of. And now, as I look and I go back through it, hopefully I can go through these movies in the next couple of years, a couple of months. But baseball movies are definitely my favorite. And one hard thing about a baseball movie is you have to either go with the acting or you have to go with the talent. And there's not very many actors that can sit out here and field a ground ball and swing a bat and hit a home run and things like that. So you got to do the people that edited baseball and sport movies. My hat goes off to you for all that you do. So once again, that is Baseball the Movie by Noah Gattel. All right, we're getting down to the last 2 books, and that's one I always pronounce this one wrong. I always do. Did Everyone Have an Imaginary Friend or Just Me by Jay Ellis. Now, Jay Ellis, those of you that watch Insecure, know Jay Ellis is Team Lawrence on Insecure. Did a real good job on there. But he talks about wanting to write this book and writing this book during the pandemic. And this just released, I want to say last year. And it's a good book. It is a good book. I gave it 4 stars. He just talks about his life and growing up. Jeez, I got the hiccups, y'all. Y'all gotta help me. I don't know if I'm gonna edit this out. But he talks about writing this book and he talks about just growing up and him being the only child and him pretty much creating an imaginary friend to enjoy this time with him. They got into some trouble. They went into some milestones and some low milestones of what happened in his life. But at one point in time, once he got to high school, this kind of imaginary friend just kind of disappeared. But in between that time, he talked about, the advice that his imaginary friend would give him, the trouble they would get into. And it's written very well in a sense where you're following along and you're laughing a little bit, but your mind is trying to remember. And at least I was, as a kid, what was I doing around this age? Like, did I act like this? I never had an imaginary friend, but some of the scenarios of when he's dealing with a girl he likes, or when he's trying out for a basketball team, or he's starting to get into acting, it's very important to have someone else there, having someone else around you to be able to talk to be vulnerable with, to be embarrassed with, to the point that like, I can be embarrassed with this person because they know me, even if they're imaginary. But it's a very good read. It's a very good read. I would say it's a great read for an adult. It's a great read for an adolescent. It is about around a little bit over 250 pages. It's a really good book written by a Black author. So I definitely, definitely, definitely think you should buy. Once again, that's Did Everyone Have an Imaginary Friend or Just Me by Jay Ellis. And last but not least, we have book number 9 here, Heaven. See, I always mess this title up. The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. This is the very first book that I read by James McBride. I've seen that he's written probably well over 5 or 10 books, like well over that. But this is the first book that I've read of his. This book popped up on Obama's reading list. Obama does a reading list at the end of every year, pretty much. And like I said, like kind of just like Percival Everett and James, I saw a lot of people posting about this. I would see this cover. I follow a lot of people that talk about books, and this is definitely a book a lot of people felt the need to talk about and discuss. This book is close to 400 pages. And the thing I really like and I really enjoyed about this book is that, when it starts off, there's so many people in this book, and it's about these people in a small town, and this murder happens, and they pretty much just tell a story about this small town, the the lineage of it, and also the history of it. And so every chapter you're seeing something from a different character's point of view, which I really, really liked. It kept the movie. It kept the book exciting. It kept the book kept me interested between the pages and kept my nose in the book. And it also, I felt like it did a good job painting each character for the reader to be able to see or develop in their own mind. And I gave this book 5 stars. It's very moving. I want to say I took maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks on this book. It's one of those books, and you'll have books grab you like this every now and then, where you're just reading, and you're like, all right, I'm going to read one more chapter, and you finish that chapter, then you say, all right, I'm gonna just read one more chapter because I feel like I'm on the brink or I'm on the precipice of learning something or something else of that nature. And I kept doing that. I find myself kept doing that. I would wake up and I would read this book. I would be read this book before I went to sleep. James McBride does a great job with how he writes. It's very descriptive. It's very witty and funny in here on how he describes his characters and his characters' personalities and what they say. And it's a very good book written by another black author. So 5 stars for The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. And those are the 9 books that I wanted to talk about. Now I'm going to reach in here and grab one more book. And this is a book I haven't read yet. It's been on my list. And I've heard a couple other people read it. And like I said, I love biographies, autobiographies. I love learning about famous people. And this book is Chronicles of the Juice Man by Juicy J and Soren Baker, a memoir. I haven't read it yet. Hopefully, I'll get it read in 2025. Let me know if you've read this book or know somebody that's read this book, what they got to say about the book. I'm always going to let you guys know what I'm reading because we're one big happy family. So, once again, that's Uncle Drew. Those are the 9 books that I've read over the last couple months. Hopefully, I'll get to a review about each one. That was just a quick little synopsis of the books I wanted to read from this box, or the books I want to talk about from this box. So hopefully I'll keep everything coming for you guys, and I will catch you guys soon. Stay healthy.